Good morning, everybody. We're going to be working on page 84 today, and we're going to be focusing on arranging fractions greater than 1, arranging decimals, and arranging fractions from greatest to least. And we're going to make all of these friendly decimals so that we're able to do it. So let's zoom in and start with A, C, and B. We will begin focusing on 27 tenths, and we want to make 27 tenths into a decimal. So I'm going to focus my attention on 27 tenths here, and I want to make that a decimal. So 27 tenths, if I take out 10 tenths, and I take out another 10 tenths, I know that this is a whole, and that this is a whole. And I have 7 tenths left over. I know that this is going to equal 2 whole and 7 tenths. Perfect. So what I want you to do is I want you to place 2 and 7 tenths underneath this fraction greater than 1, because that is 2 and 7 tenths. So we figured that out. Now with our next one here, 2 and 7 hundredths, we don't need to do anything to that. That's already a decimal. Our next is 27 hundredths. And with 27 hundredths, we just had to change that into a decimal, and that is pretty simple for us. We can just say 0 and 27 hundredths. Perfect. And then 2 and 71 hundredths. Well, in order for us to put that as a decimal, it's going to be 2 and 71 hundredths. And, but with this, here we go. That's where it's going to start getting difficult for us. So we need to make 227 hundredths into a decimal. This is a fraction greater than 1. So I'm going to take out 100 hundredths, which I know is 1 whole. I'm going to take out 100 hundredths, which I know is 1 whole. And I have 27 hundredths left. So I know that this is 2 whole and 27 hundredths. So 2 whole, So that's 2 whole and 27 hundredths. All right, now we have our decimals. So I have decimal here, decimal there, decimal here, decimal here, decimal here, and a decimal here. We need to place these decimals from greatest to least. So the decimals that are the greatest. So looking at each one, I can see that 2 and 72 hundredths is my first greatest. 2 and 71 hundredths is my next greatest. 2 and 7 tenths is my next greatest. And looks like 2 and 27 hundredths is my next greatest. And 2 and 7 hundredths is my next greatest. And then the smallest decimal is 0 and 27 hundredths. Perfect. All right, we ordered them from greatest to least. All right, let's try B. And remember, we might have to change. We're going to change them to decimals to make this a little bit easier for ourselves. So, in order for us to do this, we need to look at each one and focus on changing them to a decimal. So I'm going to work with 12 and 3 tenths here. I'm going to change this to a decimal. So the decimal I'm going to change it to is going to be 12 and 3 tenths. Perfect. And then next, I'm going to change, oh, I don't need to change this, so this is good as is. So 13 and 2/10, perfect. Okay. I need to change this, 134 hundredths, so I'm going to have to do some work on the side here. And this is a fraction greater than 1, so we can take out 100 hundredths. And we only have 34 hundredths left. Perfect. So I know that this is going to be 1 whole and 34 hundredths. So I'm going to put 1 whole and 34 hundredths in that spot right there. And, okay, so it looks like 13 and 2 hundredths. I don't need to change that. That's already a decimal. Awesome. And 12 and 20 hundredths. I can just make that a decimal. Simple. Yeah, 12 and 20 hundredths. Perfect. This was a lot more simple for us on this second problem. A lot more simple. So now let's order it from greatest to least. All right, so let's look at it real quickly. Looks like 13 and 2/10 is going to be my first greater number. I'm looking at the wholes. 13 and 2 hundredths, nice. 12 and 3/10, nice. 12 and 2/10, and then 1 whole and 34 hundredths is my last one. Awesome. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to try C on your own. So you're going to have to change each of these into decimals. So I want you to try it on your own, just like we did together on the last problem. I want you to make these into decimals. So pause the video, work on these, do your best, and order them from greatest to least. All right, we are going to continue doing the same exact thing that we just did for the other ones. We're going to highlight each of these, and we're going to make them into decimals. So 7 and 34 hundredths. Pretty simple. Not too bad. This next one is going to be 7 and 4/10. Not too bad. This one's simple too. 7 and 3/10. All right, this next one is going to be a little bit more tricky for us because it is 750 hundredths. Okay. However, instead of taking out 100 hundredths for wholes for each one, I know I can take out 700 hundredths, and this equals 7 whole. And what do I have left? I have 50 hundredths. So this is actually 7 whole and 50 hundredths. And then, this is just 75. Interesting. And this is a regular decimal, so we are good there. Cool. Okay, remember we're ordering them from greatest to least. So starting with our greatest, definitely 75 is going to be my first. That's going to be the greatest. It's obviously the largest whole number. Next is going to be 7 and 50 hundredths. Next is going to be 7 and 4/10. Next is going to be 7 and 34 hundredths. Next is going to be 7 and 3/10. And the last one is going to be 7 and 2/10. Cool. And that is ordering decimals from greatest to least. All right, very good. All right, let's go on to the next section of this lesson today. And what we're going to be focusing on is some word problems. And so I'm going to set you up with the word problems, but then I want you to solve on your own. So let's focus on 3. In a long jump, Rondo jumped 1.64 meters. Or Rhonda, sorry, Rhonda. I'm going to, her name is Rhonda, starting with R, so I'm going to give her a total of 1.64 meters, or 1.64 hundredths of a meter. And then Mary jumped 1 whole and 6/10 of a meter. And then let's go brown. And then Carrie jumped 94 hundredths of a meter. Perfect. Oh, and we have Michelle. Man, there's a lot of people. And then Michelle jumped 1/6 of a hundredth of a meter. All right, then who jumped the furthest? So who was the greatest amount here? And what you're going to have to do is the same thing we did above, where you're going to have to convert these into fractions or mixed numbers into decimals. So I'll leave you there. So pause the video, solve. Excellent. After you did the math, you should have seen that Rhonda, she jumped the furthest by far.